Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Every now and then, as an attorney, just watching what happens in courts, occasionally you'll see a defendant get really, really lucky. Something will happen where they'll get off, and they got lucky in something happening, a witness not showing up or something like that. So those things don't happen all that often. However, Will sent me a note and said, Steve, check this out. From Charlotte, North Carolina. Hundreds of criminal cases dismissed in Mecklenburg County due to a clerical error. A clerical error resulted in hundreds of criminal cases being dismissed. Now, you have to understand, depends on which side of this equation you're on as to whether or not this is good news or bad news. If you had charges against you and they were dismissed due to a clerical error, you go, whoo, dodged one. If you're the victim of a crime, however, and you find out that the person who victimized you turns out that they got off on a technicality, you're like, wait a second, that's not fair. So things like this really shouldn't happen, especially on this wide of a scale. Nick Oxner wrote this for WBTV. Hundreds of criminal cases have been dismissed in Mecklenburg County because of a clerical error that has impacted cases for months. This has been going on for a while. The error has affected cases in private warrant court, which involves cases where one person goes to the magistrate and files criminal charges against another person. Court records reveal more than 600 cases have been dismissed or, in some cases, postponed because of the problem since early August. So postponing it's not as bad because things get postponed in court all the time. It's one of the things that courts are good at, is dragging stuff out. A review of records found more than 200 assault cases were dismissed, including more than 40 cases involving assault on a female, more than 15 assault by gunpoint, and one case of an assault on a child under 12. So these are very, very serious cases, and those 200 cases were dismissed. The reason for the dismissal is noted on each file, and it's also noted on the court docket. And so, for instance, quite often, if the prosecuting witness does not show up, there's not much of a case. But the problem is that sometimes it happens because the victims were not properly notified that their case is going to be heard. One victim impacted by the error is a woman that the TV station spoke to. She took a warrant out against a family member who slammed her hand in a door, causing her to break some bones. Unlike in many cases, she and the defendant were both in court, but the case was dismissed anyway. Her attorney stood up and said, based on some administrative or clerical error, we move for dismissal. She recounted to an interview with the TV station. The judge turned to me and said, I know it's not fair, but unfortunately we're going to have to dismiss the case. All that's written on the court file for her case is dismissed by court due to procedural error. So she was the complaining witness. She showed up and they said, we got to dismiss your case due to a procedural error. The judge who dismissed the case is the chief district judge who agreed to answer questions about this problem and why it's happened for months and what she's doing to make it stop, to fix it. But through a spokesperson, she canceled the interview 30 minutes before it was supposed to take place. And I understand that judges are often loath to discuss pending cases and so on. And you rarely see judges speaking to the media, so I don't blame her for that at all. Instead, however, she sent a written statement. Any issues or concerns arising from the administration of cases in private warrant court, including those noted in your inquiry, have been brought to the attention of court leadership who are actively working together to resolve the issues. Now, I can tell you that I actually know a woman who's a court administrator. She's one of the people who oversees how the court is run. Like if you were to view it as a business or a business entity, not to make money, although they do that, but simply running it, making sure that the administration runs properly. And they track things. How many cases were heard? How many cases were disposed of? How many cases are still pending? They have all that information, especially nowadays with computers and so on. And so when somebody starts seeing a disproportionate number of cases dismissed due to clerical errors, the administrators are aware of it, and they should be able to figure out quickly what's going on and make it stop. The spokesperson did not respond to follow-up questions, and the statement did not explain why nothing had been done to address the underlying issues that caused the cases to be dismissed, even though the problem started back in August and continued through October. I felt like the justice system was fractured, the woman who was speaking earlier about her hand, I didn't even get to have my day in court. The responsibility of prosecuting private warrant cases, including notifying victims of court dates, falls on prosecutors. But like the judge, the Mecklenburg County District Attorney refused to answer questions for the story. And in an emailed statement, a spokesperson for the county attorney claimed incorrectly that the problem only affected cases scheduled on 2 days of private warrant court. However, that statement said the DA was working to address the problems but did not provide any details on what those efforts were. So we don't know what they're doing to address it. They're simply addressing it. The pandemic and subsequent labor shortages and resignations have dealt a major blow to every court agency in our district, which was already dramatically under-resourced, considering it contains the highest case volume in North Carolina. Such staffing challenges often result in court employees having to undergo new training or take on tasks in addition to their regular workloads. It's a challenge that my own office knows all too well. My office is committed to working with our court partners to ensure that Mecklenburg County courts operate properly. And then, of course, you should know that this is not counting the thousands of cases, traffic cases, that were accidentally dismissed earlier this year. And so the funny thing is, when I got this story sent to me by Will, my first thought was, I think I've seen this story before. I don't think I did a video about it, but there was a situation where thousands of traffic cases were dismissed. Again, just willy-nilly. And so now you've got the criminal cases being dismissed. Previously, you had the traffic cases dismissed. And for most of us, we've had traffic tickets in our past. And if they got dismissed on a technicality, you take it, right? Recent problems in criminal court came after WBTV previously exposed a years-long backlog of cases to release police video and a case in which the public was illegally prevented from accessing a court proceeding. So there's all kinds of issues going on there. Now, the crime victim in the story here wants court officials to take immediate steps to ensure that future victims like her can have their day in court. I don't know where the glitch is, but there surely is one. It needs to be found because it's affected people like me. So, that's the other thing, is that if a case gets filed and it has merit, the court needs to address it and do what's necessary to address it. That's the job of the court. And of course, you're hoping for some sort of justice to happen. If somebody's wronged, there's some kind of justice that, results. And the thing about it is that in more recent years, and I'm talking about, last 30 or 40 years, they've made a real effort to allow victims to have more say and more participation in what happens in court. In the old days, before I was an attorney, it was not uncommon that somebody would commit a crime, they'd get arrested, they'd get charged, they'd get put on trial, they'd get sentenced, they'd get sent off to prison. And the victim, who may have testified against that person, may have done nothing more than simply testify. And I heard complaints over the years from people who said, they called me to testify. I testified. I never even found out what happened. I had to call around and find out what happened. And so now they have all kinds of protocols in place in many states to keep the victims updated on what's happening with the case. This case is going to trial, it's not going to trial, they've been offered a plea. Some states actually require the prosecutor to contact the victims and let them know what's happening. We've talked about that before. But the strange thing about this is that Mecklenburg County is actually a beautiful place. I've been there. I did a ton of research there at the library years ago, writing a book about Bobby Isaac, who drove that car. And of course, Charlotte is ground zero, the birthplace of NASCAR. And so if you want to find out about the early days of NASCAR, you can read the newspapers from the Charlotte area, which are all on microfiche at the Mecklenburg Library. So I've been there before, so it was kind of surprising to see this story pop out of there. But like I said, there was two different massive events. One was the dismissal of thousands of traffic cases, accidentally dismissed, and then hundreds of criminal cases dismissed due to some sort of clerical error. And now they're saying, well, we're short-staffed, we're underfunded, we're overworked, which all might be true. But then the other question is, well, is this happening at all of the county courthouses in North Carolina? Or is there something special about Mecklenburg? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's happening. I thought we'd talk about it, and hopefully they'll get a handle on it and straighten that out. So Will, thanks for sending it from WBTV. Hundreds of criminal cases dismissed in Mecklenburg County due to a clerical error, and this is after thousands of traffic cases were similarly dismissed not that long ago. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Live your life by a compass, not a clock.